No way. There are recent draft talks all across the board for the San Antonio Spurs, but one name that has recently been linked to him by an article is Duke's 7'2" Khaman Maluach to come in and man the backup center position. But the way the Spurs would get him is honestly insane. We have to talk about this recent report, what the article says, and how Khaman Maluach would fit the Spurs. And I honestly think it's a lot better than I thought at first, but it's not just that. We also have another report about a potential change coming to the Spurs coaching staff, as Mark Stein reveals that the Spurs are very interested in prying away one of Dallas's assistant coaches and top defensive coordinators. A lot of big stuff coming up in this episode of Spurs Digest, and we'll start right there in Dallas. As you know, with the New York Knicks, they fired Tibbs. They're looking for a new head coach. And to provide some context, they're looking at Jason Kidd. Now, that's been one of these big reports. And Jason Kidd, he's had some of his staff members follow him everywhere. I mean, he's coached a bunch of different teams in this league, as we all know. After he retired a number of years ago, hey, he's been somewhat successful. You know, some places, maybe less successful in others. But one guy that's been following him around is Sean Sweeney, his assistant coach. And Mark Stein recently, I'll link this article down below, league sources tell the Stein line that the San Antonio Spurs, furthermore, have expressed strong interest in trying to hire Sweeney away from Dallas to work alongside new Spurs full-time head coach Mitch Johnson. If we take a look at the current coaching staff, Mitch Johnson, Brett Brown, Matt Nielsen, Will Sevening is the trainer. So we're pretty familiar with the coaching staff in San Antonio. We know Mitch, though, and there might be some changes even coming to assistant coaches. And we'll start here with Sean Sweeney. Now, look, right now this report is interesting because I'm like, okay, what's up with Sean Sweeney? I knew a little bit about him, but I didn't know as much as I think, I didn't know as much as I do now, and I did a little digging. And so Sean Sweeney, a lot of people credit him with very good defensive coaching. He brings in different defensive coaching mindsets. He took over for Jason Kidd during the COVID protocols to be the coach, but he has coached the Mavs to be a pretty good defensive team. And the guy was formerly a Division I and Division II college player, and honestly, he was a video coordinator at first. And who else did that? Eric Spoelstra. Just saying, people that are video coordinators, they have a good mind for the game if they move up the ranks, and that's exactly what Sean Sweeney did. But his ability to change the defensive identity of his teams and taking players that maybe were not as good defensively into players that can really fill a role, even if, look, their foot speed's not that great, their instincts don't really show up every single second. Sean Sweeney was one of these guys, from what I've seen, that is really able to take certain guys and turn them into effective defensive players by knowing where to be and what to do and when. So I'm actually really interested in this right here. And I also like the idea that we're seeing maybe some turnover in the Spurs staff, right? Mitch Johnson bringing in his own guys, the Spurs going out and grabbing an assistant that they really like to start to spur the growth of this team moving forward. With this defensive backbone of Victor Wembanyama, you could really build one of the best defense of all time, and I truly believe that around Victor. And Sean Sweeney feels like the kind of guy that could really do this. So I'm actually all for this kind of change of scenery for him, to bring him into San Antonio, bring a new fresh face into the organization. And I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on this. Take a look into Sean Sweeney. From what I've seen, I quite like him. I haven't been able to pry him away from Jason Kidd so far in his career, but maybe our boys just might be able to. But look, talking about the future, building for the future, there's a lot of talk about what the Spurs are going to do with this draft, and it's been mostly focused on the number 2 pick, as it should be. I mean, that's Dylan Harper. We do have the number 14, and there's a lot of names surrounding there, and one recent name that has come up is Khaman Maluach. And Maluach, I mean, I'll roll the highlights again for you. Like, he is just a rim protector, and that's kind of what he does. He can also finish down low. He's hitting some threes, though. He hit some in college. Like, he hit one in the NCAA tournament. He's hit some in the combine stuff. But look, his bread and butter is being down low. He's only been playing basketball for, I think, 5 years. 7'2", unbelievable player. Here are his stats. But the recent report actually comes from Hoops HQ, and I'll link it down below, and I'll read it to you because it is very interesting. Another buzzy name tied to the Spurs is Maluach, 7'2" center out of Duke. The Spurs could be building twin towers with Wemby and Maluach, and hey, look, we know as Spurs fans that we need a backup center, or at least someone else that can protect the rim and bring some energy when Wemby is off the floor. I'll dive into that more in a minute. Look, there's an appeal to drafting another young big that can learn and grow alongside Wemby, but it would be very unlikely that the Spurs would shock everyone and take Maluach with the number 2 pick. But they could be looking to trade down or package the number 14 pick for a shot at the talented center. And this is where it gets crazy. The fact that trading down is even proposed is genuine insanity. Trading down from Dylan Harper to a guy that's been playing basketball and fight. Look, I think Maluach is going to be great. You don't trade down from someone like Dylan Harper to get Khaman Maluach. I think that even that assertion that it could be possible is insane. So sorry for calling out this article. That is ridiculous. No chance in the world ever. Trading up, however, I also think is unlikely. Now, I think it depends on the trades that the Spurs decide to do outside of this. I mean, look, we're hearing a lot of talk about Kevin Durant, Giannis stuff, whatever. I don't think Giannis is really a realistic probability, but Kevin Durant, that 14 pick, if that could come to fruition, maybe that could move. But trading up from 14, if you don't get a big trade this offseason, trading up from 14 to around where Maluach is projected to go, around 9, like the Raptors are really heavily linked to Maluach. I think a lot of Raptors fans have basically said, hey, he's our guy. Like, that's who we're getting. Fair enough, but I think trading up to 9 or 8, it's not going to be easy, but I think it's going to be possible. And depending what the Spurs want to do, not to mention the Spurs could trade out some guys. If you want to free up a bit of money and you want to, bring in another contract, I don't know. You can mess around with your salary cap here, because if we move out some money, we could sign some different players, that kind of thing. And if you want to move out a decent player with the 14 pick to move up to get a Maluach, you could. I do think it's unlikely, though, because I think, if the Spurs are going to do that, they'd have to send one of their future first, whether the Atlanta first or the Dallas first or whatever, right? That pick swap. And I just don't see that worth it just to move up to get Maluach. And again, I think he's great. As Danny Chow at The Ringer said, The Ringer's breakdown's fantastic. I'll link that down below as well. They say players in Maluach's archetype are typically seen as floor raisers, but his unique style of P&R defense could be more of a ceiling play. His arms are constantly in motion, moving up and down like he's an anthropomorphic mini-golf windmill that follows you around the fairway. What a way with words Danny Chow has. I love reading his scouting reports, but when you watch Maluach play, his pick and roll game on defense and offense is very, very fun to watch. He's a lob threat constantly. He can even step out and hit the three occasion. I haven't really seen a lot of pick and pops, but his mobility on defense has improved so much year over year over year. You'd never really know this guy's only been playing ball for 5 years. His instincts are honestly incredible. Postmodern rim protecting titan with all the tools to be a perfect pick and roll finisher. Now, using a pick there in the top 10 to get a guy that projects to be your long-term backup, some might say is questionable. I say it's a decent fit. And I think that if there's ever a possibility that the Spurs could move up from 14 to draft a guy like Maluach, I actually think that might be worth it. Because it's just a reminder, like we talked about this a few videos ago, of all the Spurs lineups used this year, every single one of their top 6 lineups, every single one with at least 100 minutes played together, either has Victor Wembanyama or Bismack Biyombo, who we only signed late into the season. That is how much the backup center position has just been changing throughout this year, whether it was Gosse or maybe Mamu for a couple games, or Sochan. Our 7th most used lineup, the one just off this list, like I mentioned in the other video, was actually one with Sochan at center. So needing a backup center is something that we know we need, and it's proven here by the stats. And a guy like Maluach actually, to me, really fits that bill of being an energy guy. He gets a lot of rebounds, minus that one game. Ignore that. 7'2", 0 rebounds. Just ignore that game. Look, he got the tools. He's still young. He's still learning to play basketball. He's going to get drafted because his ceiling looks very high. Is he ever going to be an offensive superstar? No, probably not. But he's shown flashes of being able to hit the 3 ball at the very least. And look, 7'2", 250, and I believe he's still 18, if not 19 years old. And I don't know, I quite like the idea of Khaman Maluach, and he shoots a 3, like, 0.4 threes a game at 25%, 71% from the field. I know it's college, but 1.3 blocks, watching the clips. I feel like he's a perfect fit. Does that mean that we would trade up to get him? Probably not, because I think number 14, there's just as many guys that you could make a good case for if you're San Antonio. And, I'm also all for picking best player available, or who you project to be the best player in 5 years from now. It's kind of the way I look at it. And I think that Maluach could very well have a very high ceiling, depending on how he continues to progress, considering how much better he's gotten year over year since really starting to play basketball. Very excited at what he could be, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think there's any world the Spurs would trade up from 14 to try and land Maluach? I think it would be expensive. Too expensive for me, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But listen, that'll do it for this episode of Spurs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for tuning in every single day. I've been your host, Josh Gosse, and I'll catch you in the next one.